Hey guys, Brandon Kowallis here, Director of the Salt Lake Community College Concurrent Enrollment Program. And today in this episode, we're going to be talking about how we here at Salt Lake Community College in the Concurrent Enrollment Program nurture and maintain the relationships that we've developed with our high school partners and with our college partners. Now, in a previous episode, I had talked a little bit about meetings, and we looked at our meeting structure for maintaining these relationships with all of these different partners out there. But how did we decide, which meetings or communications or trainings or whatever to have with our different partners in order to nurture and maintain those relationships? Today, we're going to dive in, we're going to talk about that. But before we do, let me just say that relationships, when it comes to your program, are absolutely everything. I mean, you are nothing without relationships, and I really mean that. I mean, think about it. How did you get where you are today? If you rewind the clock, back maybe in your younger days, or maybe when you're a teenager, there was a teacher or maybe a parent or a friend or someone that you had a relationship with that maybe encouraged you or inspired you to go to college. So then you went to college, and then maybe there was a teacher that inspired you, that you had a great relationship with, that lit a spark that ignited and caused you to say, hey, I think I want to go into this field. And then you had other teachers that taught you information. You then graduated, you got hired, and then someone sort of helped you get up to speed to where you were. And then, building your program, it's not something you can do yourself. You're dependent on other people to help you with that. With a personal example, I do a lot of cave photography. So I love going caving, I love taking pictures, and I've gotten pretty good at it. And over the years, I've had lots of opportunities to do some amazing things. I've been on the History Channel and helped with the show that they did a while back on, I think it was called Journey to the Center of the World or something like that. So I helped with that. I've had the opportunity to be published. I've been able to go to some amazing caves, lay the first human footprints. And, I could say, well, that's because hard work and dedication. And, that's absolutely a part of it. But hard work and dedication without relationships is, just hard work. You don't really get anywhere, because none of those opportunities would have arisen if I hadn't had relationships with other cavers in the national community who, when they were approached with different, opportunities like filming an episode for the History Channel, they said, well, do you have a photographer? You're looking for a photographer. Well, I know Brandon. He's great, and he'll produce some great images for you. Or maybe a new cave was discovered, and they said, oh, hey, well, I know Brandon is great at, survey, cartography, and photography. It'd be great to have along. So it's those connections and those relationships that are absolutely vital to maintain when it comes to just life in general, but more importantly, with regards to this episode that we're shooting in, the context of concurrent enrollment. For building your concurrent enrollment program, you must have positive relationships with all of your stakeholders. Now, just because you have, positive relationships doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to solve problems effectively. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can effectively solve problems that arise using those relationships, so you come out with a great solution in the end that everybody's on board with. It's sort of like change management. When you're going to change something because there's a problem, a lot of times people dread change. But there are ways to navigate that to ensure that that change isn't as disruptive as sometimes change can be. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, so that when you have this good relationship, a problem doesn't arise and it turn into a bad relationship. But instead, you want the good relationships to navigate the problems together and come out even stronger. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump over here to the board, and I'm going to walk through 6 things that you can do to begin nurturing and strengthening relationships and solving problems. So the first thing that you need to do, and as you're watching this, I would invite you to pull out a piece of paper or type on your computer some of the things I'm going to ask you to do. So the first thing that you need to know when it comes to relationships is you need to know who your stakeholders are. All of them. A lot of times we get pigeonholed and we think, oh yeah, my stakeholders. Well, that's the high school counselors, and then the department chairs and the faculty. Yeah, those are my stakeholders. Well, what about IT? And what about maybe even custodians? Are they sometimes involved within your operations? What about the secretaries or the front desk people at the high school? What about the students? I mean, they're a stakeholder. So think about all of the stakeholders, the big ones and the little ones. And I want you to take a minute and write down every one of the stakeholders who are in some way, in any way, connected to your program. So take a second and do that. You can pause the video. Okay, now after you've done this, the next thing that you need to do is look at that list, and then I want you to know your key stakeholders. I want you to circle who are the key stakeholders. Now, when I say key stakeholders, these are the individuals on that list that if they ain't happy, your program ain't happy. So you need to identify, if your students are disgruntled with your program, or the individuals in the high school who manage the operations of the concurrent program at the high school, if they're unhappy, then there's a likelihood that there's going to be a lot of contention. There's going to be, this marketing, this idea of selling concurrent enrollment to other people. They're not going to do that. They're going to do the opposite. They're going to complain about how lousy of a program it is, and that's going to impact your enrollments and other things. So who are the key stakeholders that if you don't maintain a good, positive relationship with them, your program will significantly suffer? So go ahead and circle from the list here who your key stakeholders are. I'll give you a second to do that. Go ahead and pause the video and circle those. Okay, next, once you've identified your key stakeholders, now you need to figure out how are you going to nurture these stakeholders so you have an ongoing positive relationship. So you need to develop a connection and a value add strategy. Now let me explain sort of what these are. So the connection strategy is how are you going to stay connected with them on a regular basis? Now regular could be once a year, it could be once a month, it could be once a week. It's going to depend on the stakeholder and what they need. So for some of our stakeholders, like for example the principals, I like to stay in touch with them a couple of times a year because concurrent enrollment is just a minor part of what they do. So I like to attend their staff meetings twice a year and just sit down and say, how are things going? What's working? What's not working? I'm the director. If you ever need anything, contact me. So think about how are you going to stay connected with them. This could be a meeting, it could be webinars, it could be emails, it could be all kinds of different ways that you could maintain a connection. So I want you to write those down. And then the value add strategy is how are you going to add value to them? So it's one thing to connect with them, it's another thing to connect and add value. So are you going to create some sort of a report? Are you going to create a training? Are you going to create materials for them that they would find useful? Now let me pause for a second. I said that they find useful. Right now, you're just brainstorming these ideas for your key stakeholders. You may identify some ideas that you present to your stakeholders, and they might say, yeah, that doesn't add value to me. So you can scratch that one off the list. Or they might say, yeah, you want to meet once a week? No, that ain't happening because, I'm pretty darn busy. But I would love to get together, once a semester or maybe 5 times a year or once a month or whatever. So at this stage, you're just developing some ideas, but what you're going to need to do is ask them, does this idea that I have for staying connected and adding value, does it really add value and does it make you feel connected? And if the answer is no, then ask them, well, what does? What do you want from me? What can I give to you so that you feel connected to us, so that you feel like all of your needs are met and you're not like floundering over here and afraid to come talk to us. We want you to feel comfortable approaching us. When you have issues arise, we want you to bring those to us and feel like we're going to listen and we're going to care. So what can we do when it comes to staying connected and adding value to you? So do that. Okay, now once you've developed this connection value add strategy, then we've sort of got the seeds planted for nurturing and maintaining your relationships with your different partners out there. But now we need to jump to the thing that often tears relationships apart, and that is when problems arise and we don't know how to solve those effectively, so relationships get damaged and then we have to deal with that. So how do we navigate problems in a way that we don't have to damage any relationships, or if we do, we can sort of talk it out. So, and on the latter part, if we do damage a relationship, if you've got a good relationship, then hopefully when feelings get hurt, you're able to approach them and say, I'm really sorry. I made a mistake here. Let's talk about this and let's see if we can come up with a good solution. But in order to prevent that from happening, what you need to do after you've got these first three done is identify now what are the problems that you're facing right now within your program. So I want you to write those down. What are the problems? What are the things that cause you frustration, that cause you pain, that give you a headache, that you hear your partners complaining about, that maybe your staff complains about? I want you to write those down, every single one of those problems. So pause the video and make that list. Okay, now once you've got your list put together, you've got your problems, now what we need to figure out, and this is where a lot of relationships sometimes get damaged. We identify a problem and we want to solve it. We want it fixed and out of the way so we don't really have to deal with it anymore. So we come up with a solution. We will launch the solution and everybody goes, what are you thinking? And then things start falling apart and people put their foot down and say, I'm not going to implement this solution. And the reason why that happens a lot of times is because we identified it in a vacuum. We didn't involve these stakeholders who are impacted. So once you've identified your problems, next you need to identify who are the problem stakeholders. So problem one, who all in this list of all of my stakeholders is in any way impacted by this problem. They have to deal with it in one way or another, small or large. Make a list of all of those individuals and next to the problem. So you're going to do that with every single problem. Make a list of all the stakeholders who are in any way impacted or touch in any way that problem. So go ahead and take a second, write those down. Okay, now once you've done that, you've got your problems, you've identified your stakeholders. Now you need to get those individuals together to talk about this problem. So you're going to call a meeting together of those stakeholders. Now you don't have to involve all of them. I mean, we've got over 350 instructors. If we have a problem that impacts instructors, we're not going to say we need all 350. We just need a few representatives of that group, maybe one from each district or something like that. They can come and share their perspectives. So grab a group of those stakeholders. You're going to come together, and here are the things that you're going to do, is you're going to ask. Now, what are you going to ask them? The question that you want to ask them, and I'm going to actually step back. Let's step back before we talked about problems, and we talked about this developing a connection or value add strategy. One thing that you might ask them in this very first meeting that you have is, here's what I'm thinking for staying connected with you and adding value to you. And you're going to ask them, do you agree, would you agree that these ideas will add value to you, or are they a waste of your time? And then you'll get that feedback. From the problem perspective though, when you've got an issue that comes up, what you're going to ask them is number 2 here. Would they agree that the problem is a problem? Because maybe you've sat there and something has just frustrated the heck out of you, and you're like, this is a major problem. You bring everybody together and you say, here's the problem, and then you say, wouldn't you agree that it's a problem? And they say, I don't really feel like it's a problem. And they're all like, nodding their head, saying, yeah, I mean, it's not really a problem for us. I don't see what the issue is. If that happens, then you have to step back and say, okay, well, if it's not a problem for everybody else, but it's a problem for me, maybe it's something that I need to change in my perspective. Or maybe if it's a significant enough problem for you, then the discussion begins with, so you all don't see it's a problem, but I do, and this is the reason why. And if they're like, oh, okay, yeah, well, I can see how that's a problem for you, maybe we can do this to support you in solving the problem. Or maybe you say, here's the problem, I'm thinking about this for a solution, and they can say, yeah, that sounds good, or no, it doesn't sound good. So before you can even begin solving problems, everybody has to agree that it's a problem some way. Maybe it's a problem for everybody. Maybe it is a major problem for just that one person, but requires everybody to sort of help solve that. But you need to agree with every stakeholder who's impacted by that problem that it is indeed a problem. Otherwise, you're trying to solve it is not going to go anywhere. I mean, think about it. If you bring people into a room and you say, I think this is a problem, and nobody thinks it's a problem, and you say, but we're gonna fix it, and they're like, why do we have to, if it's not a problem, like, why are we even investing all this time? And so then you create a solution, you launch it, and everybody's like, yeah, it's not a problem for me, so I'm just going to ignore it. But if you can get everybody on board, then when you get to the point of launching the problem, they've all been involved in trying to solve this and fix it. And so what happens? Everybody's on board. You got buy-in. So first, you're going to agree that the problem is a problem. And if everybody agrees it's not, you're going to scratch the problem off, toss it away, and say, good, we don't have to deal with that. Maybe I need to deal with it internally. Next, you are going to collectively investigate the problem. Why do we even have a problem here? What's going on? What is the root cause of this problem? Well, it's a breakdown here, it's a breakdown there, it's this thing over here, it's that we don't even need this policy, it's blah, blah, blah. And you can make a big list of, here's the things that we think are sort of causing the problem. This is the scope, and you're sort of defining the scope of the problem and, sort of what the issue is. Once you've done that, then the next thing you move to is collectively as a group of stakeholders, all the stakeholders who are involved in this problem, sit down and they say, well, let's talk about solutions. Because a lot of times what happens is we say, here's the problem, I've thought about it, I think I understand it, here's the solution that I'm presenting. And then sometimes when that happens, people are like, well, I don't like that solution, or they're just like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, let's move forward with it. But if you collectively work together to create a solution to the problem, what does that do to buy-in? Think about it. What does it do to buy-in when you all work collectively to create a solution to a problem? Well, you've got huge buy-in because everybody's been a part of the solution. So, and maybe the idea you had is just one idea of many, and of the 10 ideas, here's the one you had, but down here, man, this idea would not only solve your problem, but it would solve like 15 other problems. So when you come together collectively to solve problems, you come up with better solutions than when you isolate yourself in a vacuum. So now this here is all just sort of the starting point, and hopefully this gives you some great tools, resources, ideas for ways you can nurture relationships and also work together to solve problems. And like I said, this is just sort of basic foundational problem solving, relationship building. There's so much more information out there. I wish I had time to share it with you all. But I'd encourage you to look up things like project management, see what the corporate world is doing out there when it comes to identifying stakeholders, maintaining relationships, and solving problems together. There's so much great information, great resources. Talk to the people you work with, and I think you'll be able to come up with some fantastic ways to maintain your relationships and also to navigate those relationships in problem solving so that you come out of a difficult situation better off than you even started. All right, everybody. Now, again, as always, if you have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, ideas, post those in the comments below the video. And until the next episode, remember, nothing is impossible out there. If you just think outside the box, think different. And one of the best ways to think different is involving stakeholders and working together to come up with the solutions. So think different. Be resourceful. You may not have the resources, but you can be resourceful. And this is a phenomenal way to be resourceful. Relationships are pretty easy to go out there and develop. You don't need money. You just need a little bit of time. You need a little bit of energy to develop strong relationships. So be resourceful. And last of all, have the courage to act. If you're a person who's, a little of an introvert, push yourself. Have the courage to step out there, meet new people, develop new relationships. And as you do that, you will see amazing things happen within your program.